Thank you so much for all of you for being here. Today's topic is masculine norms and silent struggles. Fall under the stereotypical characterization of being authoritative, and masculine may avoid getting help. On this Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, we are focusing on the silent struggles some of the men go through because of their traditional views of masculinity and the pressure to live up to the norms. The conversation, today's conversation is brought to you by SAMHAJ, one of the, as I mentioned before, one of the 4 multicultural program initiatives of NAMI New Jersey. I'm going to introduce you to our speakers now. And today's conversation will be more like a coffee table chat format. And our guests today are Dr. Jyotsna Bhatt. She's a clinical psychologist, and Dr. Vasudev Dixit, who is also a psychologist. Dr. Bhatt is a clinical psychologist and certified mindfulness trained professional with the SciPact certification, specializing in individual, couples, and family therapy, and maintains a full-time private practice in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Among her areas of expertise are depression, anxiety, ADHD, marital stress, grief, loss, adjustment, mild traumas, and corporate stress. She has also conducted corporate wellness programming in many companies. Dr. Bhatt is an avid advocate for mental health in the South Asian community and hosts the first South Asian dedicated blog on Psychology Today, the psychology of the South Asian diaspora. She explores the intersectionality between culture, ethnicity, and mental health, including themes of immigrant stress, intergenerational trauma, marriage, divorce, domestic violence, colorism, LGBTQIA plus issues, etc. As a leading voice of South Asian mental health, Dr. Bhatt has been interviewed by Refinery 29, The Juggernaut, Harvard Political Review, Forbes, NBC Online, Diversity Inc., among the high-ranking journals. Given her passion for advocacy, Dr. Bhatt has had the privilege to speak on several panels, including Yahoo, Disney, and Double Verify, across the country to help increase mental health awareness in South Asian communities. She has also appeared on such podcasts as the Happy and Human podcast, Toxic Leadership, and Immigrantly Pod. Dr. Bhatt is currently in the process of co-writing a South Asian mental health children's book series, with the first book releasing later this year. Dr. Vasudev Dixit is a psychologist, and he has enjoyed working with families, adolescents, college students, adults, and veterans in residential, inpatient, and outpatient settings. He believes change begins within a genuine relationship in which life stories can be mindfully explored and understood with intentionality and purpose. For those of us who hold marginalized and or underrepresented identities, life in silence can be stressful. In joining together, we resonate with similarities while celebrating what makes us unique. So I'm very thankful for Dr. Jyotsna Bhatt and Dr. Vasudev Dixit to be here. So I'm going to give the floor to both of them to start this conversation. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Shubha. And I feel like it's such an honor, first of all, for us to be here today. And also, I feel like I could have given Vasu an even longer bio. I'm so privileged and honored to be working alongside with you in this panel today. And I'm really excited about what we're all going to co-create together and discuss, and hopefully healing comes from this.
Indeed. I feel very much the same for you, Dr. Bhatt. Excited to thank you, Subha, for inviting us to this space. There's so much to talk about. I actually just wanted to start with who's here. Can we get that poll going?
Yes, I think it's important to know who our audience is, give us a little bit of a understanding of who we're talking to. And I think there's a poll out right now. If you could take a moment to just answer
Thank you,
those.
Caitlin, for organizing in the back.
Yes, Caitlin is our rock star
Yes.
assistant.
And so part of this is, and hopefully everyone can see the poll once complete here. You know what? I'll give it an answer too. Huh. Well, that's interesting.
Able to.
Okay, maybe it doesn't allow.
We cannot vote, it says. That's all right.
Okay,
We can
yes.
we're going to be sharing about ourselves, so that's
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah.
But we hope that people can take a look around, at least virtually, to see who's part of this conversation today. We want to recognize that cultural identity begins before we're even born. It roots in a particular time and a place, and it evolves through both our personal and collective experiences. And so when we talk about constructs like gender or ethnicity, even mental health, mental wellness, these can be experienced differently across the spectrum of people around us. And so when we arrive at a conversation or in a moment in time within ourselves, we must at some level ask, where did my thoughts and ideas come from? And how did they evolve to be where they are right now?
That's so beautifully said. And that's really what the journey we hope to be is going to be today is as we are talking today, we'd love for everyone to sort of think a little bit about your own experiences, whether you identify as a South Asian male, whether you are related to one. And that kind of goes to the questions in the poll about what brought you to this conversation. Is it something that you're supporting a friend? Just curious about the topic. I know, like sometimes, in our communities, it's why is this important? Why are we talking about it? And kind of that's totally fine. It's all valid points and all valid questions. And maybe you work in healthcare. I just want to, a shout out to fellow mental health professionals and medical folks out there, those working in community-based settings. Thank you all for the work you do. It's so important. And keep working and keep shining in your different areas and respective fields. It's really, really important for us as a community.
And for whether or not you're a professional in the healthcare field or other fields, whether you're just trying to figure out life on your own, we want to hear your thoughts actively in the chat. And the great thing with the chat, even though it might not feel like you are in it, we definitely are looking at the chat to help fuel the conversation. And at the very end, of course, we'll leave time for questions and answers or comments. So please feel free to jump in the chat, and we'll always do our best to be as inclusive as possible here.
Yes, and absolutely. The chat hopefully becomes we were just joking earlier as we were chatting, we're like, maybe the chat sort of becomes another sort of character in this, another space where we can receive information, share information. Yes, we may have an expertise in this area, but, as far as this whole topic as a whole, there's so much that we can all sort of bring to the table, so many experiences. And, so we want to make sure we honor that by giving you all a chance to share. And then, one of the questions is about the topics. We had, like Dr. Dixit just said, there's so many things we might cover. So that's why we wanted to kind of get a poll on what kind of things might be interesting to you, what sticks out, why you might want to hear about it, what you want to hear about, whether it's culture and childhood, the impact on masculine identity, whether it's understanding this term of toxic masculinity that's being thrown around as a buzzword, cultural archetypes, relationships, dating, marriage, family roles, pressures, those kind of things, or anything else, please feel free to share here.
When we're posing these questions, we thought about this question of understanding part of oneself as an option here. And when we're talking about identity and we're talking about even mental health, we cannot separate ourselves from the conversation. And so our hope is that as we are talking through this, we are collectively understanding a topic that is intrinsic to each of us, which is mental health. And specifically in this particular conversation, in honor of Men's Mental Health Month, we're focusing on men today.
I see the highest ranked one is pressures and family roles, familial roles.
Ooh.
If I'm reading that right. So yeah, a lot of people want to dive into that a little bit. And I think that's so relevant given that we're all in systems, we're all in family systems, we're all in dynamics, we're all in relationships. And I think that is definitely going to be something, and that's changing, right? Over all the types of roles and the types of pressures are changing over generations. And we'll be touching on that for sure.
Yeah.
Relationships, we've got impact of culture in childhood. Wonderful. Lots here. So it looks like all these topics are pretty popular. And so we're going to do our best, Dr. Dixit,
Yeah.
get what we can.
Yeah.
We'll go from there. All
Great.
right.
So, so we just have some initial thoughts to share as we're embarking this conversation. We want to recognize that we are all within systems in our professional and personal lives. We're in systems that can sometimes invite us to be who we are and allow us to be vulnerable and open, and systems that make it difficult to be who we are and to express ourselves. And so recognizing that mental health is not just an individual conversation, it is a collective, systemic-wide conversation.
Yes, and absolutely. You know, this idea of when you bring up systems, you think about like the different sort of roles and hats we all play in our lives. Whether you're a father, whether you're a brother, whether you're a sister, let's not just keep it to men right now, but, or, you know, you don't identify in any gender. But the point is that it is becoming sort of increasingly difficult. I think that's an interesting sort of key point, just given the changing climate, changing political climates, changing socio-political climates, changing, you know, sort of acculturation levels, the different sort of, you know, whether it's like factors that kind of affect us. They all kind of change and shape who we are, and we're constantly evolving. And I think it's important to recognize that, that we're not sort of put in these boxes. We don't put ourselves in boxes, and it's okay to evolve and change.
And I'll add, I think we're in a time where that evolution and change is happening at such a rapid rate, especially when you think about how far-reaching social media is now.
Yes.
With the introduction of AI, with this has been for many, many years, but echo chambers where we enter, even the way that algorithms push advertising, push posts that will verify our current ideas.
Yeah.
I grew up in a time where I did not have the influence of social media. And I'm very thankful for that.
I feel the same.
Right. But I think about how young minds are shaped, and pressures that I might have experienced are magnified tenfold, just by the way that ideas are being pushed, and people are now, everything's about clickbait. Everything is about the headlines that are the loudest and most polarizing, that grab your attention, and it's hard to be somewhere in the middle on anything, including our own selves.
So speaking of that, I love that you mentioned that, is that we were talking about, you know, are we coming to this talk today as psychologists, or are we coming to this talk as South Asians? And I think this is especially important for, you know, any of the South Asian therapists and mental health professionals in this audience to think about. But anybody in general that are, you know, wear several hats, what do you sort of fall into first? Which is sort of the most salient kind of identity, like label or what have you. But this was something that we were thinking about. And I feel like this is an ongoing process of how mental health is sort of evolving, and we're going to get into this because I think it goes at the heart of, the access of service, accessing therapeutic services. We are going to be talking about, mental health issues and the struggles, of South Asian men, but also the other side of this, how prepared are we as psychologists to face and meet the needs of our South Asian populations. And I know there is a push to sort of change and challenge the sort of the old ways of thinking, the Western approach that I grew with, and I studied and graduated with, this understanding of, certain theories and applying sort of a catch-all for everyone, and recognizing that that doesn't fit, and that can actually be harmful or fearful for those who are wanting to access help. So it is refreshing to see, this idea of therapy is beginning to evolve and change with the pushback now of new generations of mental health advocates, to make a more comfortable space for South Asian men. So I feel like that is something to sort of also, we'll be touching on healing later, but I think that's a big part of the conversation as well. When I think about my own, identity as a South Asian psychologist, the idea of the hat of the psychologist first or the South Asian first. So these are just things that we wanted to sort of begin at the outset to think about.
Yeah.
Diving in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why this topic now? And that kind of goes into the question of why this topic now, right? I feel like one of the really interesting facts is that we don't have enough research on, South Asian mental health. There's one stat I think that everyone sort of throws around in their research, in their topics and articles, which is, 1 in 5 South Asians in the US report mood or anxiety issues in their lifetime. But it's a lot more than that. And we know that as practitioners. There's so many effects that sort of feed into why people don't report and why people don't talk about this. Yeah, any thoughts on that, Vasu?
Totally.
Dr.
It's fine. I was Vasu before Dr. Dixon. Gosh, so I'm like trying to see, okay, were we going to talk about this later on, or do we jump right in now? It's all good here, but there's so many unspoken pains for men, and if the pandemic taught us one thing, is that isolation is a real thing. And in some ways, I think men experience that isolation in a completely different dimension, because so much of our conditioning, which we'll get to later, is found in independence and doing things by ourselves, and, if you will, a hyper reliance on self over and above seeking support from others. And so, combined with the stressors that I think we face now increasingly, I think young people are faced with stressors at a whole nother level than when I was growing up.
Yes.
The idea of, and we can really branch the tendrils in so many directions here, but I'll leave it at this, that I think education now for young people has become much, much more about product over process. And so it's about the grade, it's not about what you learned. And so then people start kind of seeing themselves in a similar way as a product. And a product to be marketed on social media, a product to be marketed to your next step in life, whether that's college or a job or something. And so these kind of shifting that I am noticing in the work that I think we both see here as clinicians is people not connecting with emotion space.
Yes.
And so there's this high intellect development for so many, but emotionally, socially, interpersonally, there's some kind of, I'm not going to say a vacuum, but there's a gap.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to say, just going back to this idea of why are we talking about this right now? What is the relevancy? I feel like we are at a time in our life where generationally these issues are coming out because more people are reaching out for help. More younger generations are reaching out for help because they are part of this system that is sort of, they're grappling, and I say we're all part of the system. We're grappling with sort of being in this world, whether it's the Western, sort of capitalist world, straddling two major sort of bodies, major cultures in our lives, and sort of having to reconcile some of these things. And what's coming out is relationship issues or parenting and child rearing issues, dealing with substance, dealing with abuse. So many different things are now coming to the forefront for South Asian individuals and communities. And more people are reaching out and saying, you know what? I know that this is something that I can't just stay home and stay quiet about. I need to go to somebody outside of this sort of sphere of influence or family that can hopefully give me some guidance. This is a little bit different than, what I've been doing, which is trying to keep quiet or get the help that I can from whatever way I can at home. Sort of, it's now, I kind of liken it to like a pressure cooker, and like literally it's exploding over now. I think that's the point in our life that we're seeing. That's why we have this explosion of mental health platforms and people talking about it. The need has risen, and we want to be ready to meet the need. And one of the questions, I think, Basu, you were just getting into it, was why men struggle with sharing this feeling. This is going to sharing feelings, right? Sharing emotion. And that's exactly where we're kind of in the direction that we're headed into right now. This idea of how do we sort of help with this vacuum? We first have to identify it, right? We first have to be aware that it's even there. I think that's a very important piece, and where it's coming from.
Absolutely. I mean, we know the statistics are really concerning, that men in general are showing a rise in suicidal behaviors, not in just the US, but over the world. There is some light here in that we are noticing that Gen Z, Gen Alpha are much more in tune with their emotions, much more willing to seek support, but their parents' generation maybe not so much. And so I can't tell you how many young adults I've worked with and adolescents who are sharing things that clearly there are other issues that are unresolved at home with parents or other elders, that if there was some intervention at that level of the social hierarchy, if you will, that there could be so much positive change downstream. I think we came across this quote here: when a man heals, generations feel it. That gives me goosebumps.
That gives me goosebumps too. I mean, it really hits at the heart of what we're trying to talk about today. And just, it's kind of the thesis and the backdrop of this, which is, how much of an influence masculinity, masculine norms, being that, patriarchy, has an influence and impacts South Asian family systems as a whole. And it is a big part of, change. Not now, just on the other flip side of this, it doesn't mean it's all about the man and he has to fix himself. We want to make that clear on the outset. It's not just about that. However, because we're talking about South Asian men today and South Asian mental health around men for Mental Health Awareness Month, we want to recognize that it plays a very huge role in sort of shaping generations to come. And, whether it's immediate spheres of influence or several generations down, this idea of intergenerational trauma that everyone understands, this idea of passing on of outdated coping mechanisms or scripts that, may be well-intentioned, well-meaning, but not necessarily helpful anymore, right? So this idea of, you know, patriarchy, can you speak a little to that, since you are I think you identify as a South Asian male?
I do identify as South Asian male.
Yeah.
Um, Raised, and I think this is an important part of my identity, right? Raised by immigrant parents. I was born and raised here in the US. My parents came from South India in 1978, actually, 1978. And so that's important, is like the when and the where, right? They came to the, well, I was born here on the East Coast. And so much of this, I think it's two things are intertwining for me, is patriarchy and the immigrant experience, and inherent in that is the American dream, and what success meant. And I think this is an important connection within myself here, is this idea of being a man and being successful are like intertwined tightly. And for so many young men and men later in their life, this idea of success, when threatened, real or perceived, when it's threatened, when whatever that success means, it actually threatens masculinity. And so to what your point earlier, but Dr. Bhatt, was that it is when a man heals, that the family also heals too. So this idea of being a breadwinner, and that's increasingly shifted as we have families now who are, and we're not speaking just to single men or just to men in a family unit, but for those who are supporting others. Historically, men have been expected to be breadwinners. Of course, now we have families now with multiple earners. But I think something that has stood the test of time is the expectation of stoicism, to not be touched by things happening. And we see this, and maybe we'll talk about this later too, in terms of archetypes.
Yes.
But we see this even in our spiritual texts or spiritual ideals.
Yes.
Or even in our media and film, movies, about what it means to be a man, and not just any man, but a viable man that people want. And for, you know, a heteronormative society, that women want.
Absolutely. I think you just, so many gems coming out. Thank you. But yeah, and I think that kind of goes to the question, which we want to ask in the chat, you know, this idea of all these expectations, right? About, you know, being the breadwinner, being successful, holding a sort of a stoic stance around feelings and those kind of things, which has a heavy burden on South Asian men. You know, what about this idea of, you know, the necessity to kind of bring out these feelings, right? Why is it such a struggle to talk about these things? That's what we're sort of trying to continue to unfold today. And one of the questions we wanted to ask you all was, and if we can have help putting this in the chat, how comfortable was your family in discussing mental health concerns? I think that's a poll, or maybe it's a poll question, actually. Can we get that poll up? Yeah, fantastic. We would love to hear from you all about this, because I know in my family, I don't think it was discussed in that way. There's a lot of sort of spiritual bypassing potentially, and the idea about spirituality and being beyond the physical and being beyond the trappings of the mind. But that felt sort of minimizing and maybe devaluing sometimes. So I was just curious if that comes up in anybody else's experiences.
And as we're waiting for you know, these results, Suba, I see you had shared some questions, so thank you for that. We will be addressing stigma on how to be supportive, that we're hoping to arrive at that by the end of this conversation. I do see kind of a personal request here about someone's personal experience, and we want to honor that and recognize that we might not be able to touch on every aspect of what was just shared here, and that this might be kind of it's definitely an important topic here for this individual, whoever shared it. It's de-identified here. If someone needs to talk, like, we can connect on the other side of this
Absolutely.
hour today.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it's part and parcel of what we're talking about here, is that families struggle, and when men are, I'll say this as a man, when men have a hard time naming, processing, or understanding their emotions, or even communicating them, so much else unfortunately falls apart. And we see this happening in so many different ways. And I appreciate the person who had shared this. I honor you, and your courage to come here and to share this part of yourself. And we hope that as we're talking here, there are going to be some things here that you can take away, to help yourself and your family.
Yeah. Just want to add, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that here. That takes a lot of guts and bravery, and I hope answers here, as I'm echoing Dr. Dixit on this, and we are both available to connect anytime. So so how are our poll results coming along? Hopefully we can hear from you all about this. Was it, as far as like how comfortable was your family in discussing mental health? It looks like 38% was not at all, and 6% was very comfortable. So that makes a lot of sense.
Pretty linear.
It tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it tracks. It's a very good spread there. Everybody else kind of in the middle there.
I'm really curious. Thank you, Suva.
Thank you.
It appears that people are not able to directly input into the chat, and that's okay. We are curious still, kind of, as you are willing and able to share, is like, what have been the reactions when emotions come up, or when difficult times come up? What have been the messages or meta messages, if you will? As we're talking here, feel free to jump in that chat.
So getting into, this topic of masculinity, we kind of wanted to understand from you all, before we kind of break it down, what words come to your mind when you think of masculinity? Please do share in the chat. We'd love to hear one word or two words. Amazing. So we got.
That was fast.
Melissa got us started. All right. Strong,
Yeah.
strong, lots of
Keep
strong.
them coming. Just.
Yeah, doesn't cry.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Stoic, yeah.
Yeah.
Resilience.
No, go for it. Caps if you
love
win,
caps.
if you mean it.
Yeah. Silenced.
Silence.
Ooh,
Huh.
interesting.
Oof.
Power. That's a great one.
Okay. Yeah. Authority, strength.
Community. Authority. That's a big one. Leader. Wow. Yes.
And I think it's important to recognize this conversation within the context of the larger stage of gender conversation over the last several years, where there was a kind of this swing in our media and in the public discourse of exposing and understanding inequities to women in the workplace, certainly in terms of assault and sexual assault, sexual abuse, and holding men accountable.
Yes.
And I think that in certain pockets that evolved other kinds of conversations that kind of splintered from that, as far as making women's health and experiences salient, which was absolutely necessary. And at the same time, I think there was, in some threads, a demonization of men at the same time. And so I'm literally in my mind holding these on two hands, that are happening at the same time. And so as we're talking today, and I'm seeing these really important words here, is to recognize where we are in our society, in time space, having this conversation. And
Right.
had I said some of these things 5 years ago, I might have been nailed to the wall.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to leave it there.
Incredible. And we always talk about, what is happening out in the media and the comment sections of some of these really polarizing topics, and what shouldn't be polarizing actually, and what you see in there. And it's concerning because it impacts sort of the ethos. It impacts the atmosphere of what we see every day, who we show up for every day. All of this impacts us. So especially when you have people like Andrew Tate out there, I'm going to mention the name, who's touting sort of toxic masculinity and, the idea of chauvinism and sort of kind of encouraging that. Yeah. And what was that?
It becomes
Justifying it and validating it. Yeah, absolutely. That's very problematic and scary. So I think this is an important awareness, an awareness point to bring to all of us.
I may even broaden it to all genders in this idea. I think gender has a overlap with sexuality, sexual identity, and role expectations. I think there's I think in Venn diagrams all the time. So somewhere there's this overlap here. And in regardless of gender, I think we're all fed with what our roles should be, whether it's our family of origin, whether it's at school, what colors the boys and the girls wear, or being told, and I think some people put it here, but like man up was one of those messages I grew up with. Man up, don't Someone cry. Said it like, boys don't cry.
Yeah.
Don't be a bee.
Yes.
Don't be a insert.
Yes.
Like,
yes. I mean, but generally, I mean, getting into the whole, we're touching on masculinity, touching on family roles. I'm glad, because this is some of the things people want to hear about. Just really quickly, just finding a quick definition of masculinity after you guys have shared such powerful sort of words. It's a set of attributes, behaviors, and roles typically associated with men and boys, often including traits like strength, courage, independence, and leadership. It's a concept that can be understood as both socially constructed and influenced by cultural and biological factors. It's not static, which I appreciate that, and varies across cultures, time periods, even within different groups of men. I think generationally, we have found that this has changed how people show up in their masculine, which is, this idea of, those from the 30s to the 50s may have been more around the stoicism idea. If you compare somebody from that time now, Dr. Dixit, and now, right, from that time to now, it's such a evolution in some ways.
Well, and I think that evolution is also, there's reactions to that.
And reaction, yes.
And words like snowflakes and these other judgment, pejorative terms here on current generations. Yeah.
On both sides, right?
Yes.
And, kind of some of these terms about stoicism and sacrifice, maybe these were things that were, again, I go back to what was needed for a cultural sort of strength, what was relied upon when you're first immigrating and coming to the country, but then what's not working now, what's not helpful anymore, and it's amazing. They actually have research, and Dr. Dixit found this, which is like generationally, the definition of masculinity, how it's lived in individuals has changed in so many ways. It's evolving. Whether it had to do with economics, whether it has to do with cultural shifts. Nowadays, you're going to ask somebody from like parents' generation to like a Gen Z individual about their thoughts on what is masculinity, and it's vastly different. But some things still remain. Go ahead.
Well, to add on, and Surbi, thank you for sharing. I want to come to that in a second. But in terms of immigration, I think about the waves of immigrants from the 1900s onwards. Those, and especially in the beginning, it was a lot of men. I think about the men who uprooted themselves, came to a different country, the US or elsewhere, and left families, left things behind. Things happened, people passed on, and these men stayed where they were. And so things like, I think about the pressures, economic pressures of making it a new country, of starting a family where you don't have social supports. I'm thinking now 20, 30, 40 years ago now, right? Where you might have been the first in your family to come to this country with no social network here, is this idea of emotions, and let's process emotions. This, to a person in that time, coming from those situations, was not even a luxury. It was not even a thing on their radar, because maybe legitimately they could not afford to financially or in terms of time. Or if I paused to think about how I missed so and so, I wouldn't be able to function without the social network there. And so to highlight, italicize, bold, underline that masculinity is informed by our experiences and our situations.
Context, yeah.
Context.
Yes. I mean, whether it's culture, whether it's your caste, class, sexuality, everything, geopolitical location, it's so true. It really varies according to that. And but you know, the main thing is that we recognize that, you know, all of this, there's a conditioning, right? That sort of that early conditioning. It's all part of that. It's all part of what sort of informs who we are and how we see ourselves. I think there was a beautiful quote that I wanted to share, unless you had some more to say on that, but I wanted to just, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to share something, but that can wait.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll just quickly say we need to unlearn the idea that being emotional is a weakness for men. Vulnerability is a strength. That was by Michael Ian Black, author and comedian. So I think that is the main sort of crux of everything that we're trying to talk about today is, you know, honoring those things, those past sort of traits, but recognizing now what is going to be helpful for change and healing and growth.
Right along those lines, when 9/11 happened, that was a real uncertain time for this country. And socially, I think I don't know if it necessarily created as much as just kicked up xenophobia that was just already there. And for a time, I'll start with my facial hair. It was a decision for me to keep it. It was something my mom was actually really concerned about. When I traveled, if I went on a plane, I would be the one randomly searched. When I went to a restaurant, and so there's always this feeling, and so of things were not safe for a long time, actually. And so as a man, all I knew to do was put on armor, psychological armor, physically, just to make myself not an easy target, whatever I imagined that to be, but project strength, right? Project those masculine traits, as we're talking about it here, right?
Yeah.
But that's an example I wanted to share with people, that our situations can, without appropriate supports, can push us and drive us to duck and cover and protect in ways that will isolate us eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of translated, thank you for that, sharing that. That was a vulnerable time. I remember my brother had similar kind of issues to deal with. And yeah, to facial hair or not to facial hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just being, you know, trying to be funny there. But
no, we live to laugh about it today.
yeah,
Right?
I mean, but I think, and all of that impacts how a person shows up in their family, right? Just getting to that early, it also adds into the conversation about that early conditioning. Already you're coming here and you're starting out with all these sort of expectations, right? Gender expectations, very gender normative expectations about being strong, powerful, authority figure, this and that. And now you're sort of given the message of be afraid, arm up, put your head down. You come to this country, you're part of the minority, right? So the model minority, as we talk about it, this idea that this, as a South Asian, you don't make waves. You know, we want to align ourselves with success. And what does that mean? We don't admit to failures. We, keep our heads down and keep moving. Meanwhile, feels like the walls, the foundation, begin to break. There's cracks. And we keep sort of trying to use superficial glue, whether it's just like, don't talk about it, because that's what something might have worked upper generations ago. I don't know how to say that, earlier, previous generations ago. We're trying to use that old glue to keep our framework together, to keep us being resilient. And not recognizing that, and even like you mentioned earlier in our spiritual texts, our religious texts, the idea of the stoicism, the virtue of pain tolerance, that's a big one. People,
Serby here said not showing emotion was a survival tactic.
yes, and even that continues to this day of like getting someone to go to a doctor until it's last minute. The parents, especially men, will put their sort of health on the back burner to, from a real sacrificial point of view, to allow their family and their children, right, to get help.
And these ideas are actually, they start so much earlier. I think about like playing sports it's like, you get hurt unless your arm is hanging off your shoulder.
Exactly.
You get back in there and you do it for the team.
Yes.
And don't be a fill in the blank.
Yes. Don't be the squeaky wheel in this whole cog. In this, yeah, kind of in some ways, yeah.
And don't show that weakness. And it became, I can say this as a man, an internalized pride that I could be bleeding, but I'm running on that field. And what does that translate to as an adult? I can work myself to 50, 60 hours a week and wake up and do it the next week. Everything just translates from early ages.
Yes. And unfortunately, our new nervous systems are not equipped. They're running on overdrive, right? While we're evolving, we're also biochemically changing. And there's new types of threats and things that we may never have faced before, whether it's, the stressors of like 60-hour week or 75-hour week jobs, or trying to make it in a place where you feel sort of isolated or alone. You may not have community, you don't have family here, those kind of things. And again, just sort of, we're bringing out all the examples, but the idea is how much this impacts individuals and impacts their systems that they're in, because they're refusing, or because somebody feels they don't want to burden someone else. Men are kind of given that message, right? I think Dr. Dixit, like the idea of don't burden others, deal with it yourself, no matter, and not recognizing that it's burdening yourself and it's actually putting stress and strain on your not only mental health, but your physical health, right? Everything is being challenged internally. And then it's this idea of, the breakdown finally happens. And is it, oh, it's too late. Let me just live this life and get through it. I've heard that so many times
Wow.
It's okay. This is good enough. Mediocrity is fine. And my mediocre life is okay. And that's all encouraged in our culture to say,
even spiritually, religiously, I've heard people, and it's not to have any kind of judgment here, but there are spiritual frameworks, religious conversations about something being God's will, or that this was my fate in this life.
Yes.
And I struggle with that as
Yes.
a bicultural South Asian,
Yes.
where in the Western Hemisphere, it's very much individualistic, that I am the captain of my own fate.
Mm.
While at the same time, I know that there have been very subtle messages that about fate, the nature of fate being something that just kind of flows, and that it's written for us. And so somewhere in my bicultural self, I've had to stitch that together, all while balancing these mental health factors at play.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so tough. It's so tough to sort of reconcile these sides of ourselves. I've had clients coming to me with those same questions.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
had my own inner struggles. Yeah, you were about to say something.
Well, I wanted to come back to the
Yeah.
you talked about systems, and in my mind, I'm really visual here, but I think about this kind of as a mirror, a two-way mirror. And on one side we have our external system, and on the other
Mm.
side we have our internal system. And so when we experience invalidation in the external system, when parts of ourselves are not recognized, parts of ourselves are undermined or denounced even, that translates to our internal system, emotionally, mentally, even physically, spiritually, and as you are recognizing too, physiologically, biologically,
Yeah.
neuropsychologically, our brains shift. And so much of the work that we do right here in therapy, and for so many of everyone here who does this work in some shape or form, personally or professionally, is that we are left to wrestle with the the active and the passive forms of oppression to
Mm.
to masculine identity, which sounds weird to say because there's a lot of privilege that comes with masculinity as
Yes.
well. But concurrent with that, there are parts of it that then lay dormantly ill. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think that that is showing up in some unfortunate symptoms in our society. Um, I did want to come back to Survey. You mentioned your 2-year-old son. Thank you for sharing that. Um, it just made me think about, so I'll just read out loud. My 2-year-old son wanted to watch Frozen, the movie, and his grandpa was like, "That's for girls." Sorry, I'm just putting that voice in there. And
Yeah.
responded that he enjoys the songs, and there's no gender associated with that movie. First of all, props to your 2-year-old son for saying,
No.
"I like those
Amazing.
songs." Okay.
Amazing.
Um, that this is not just isolating but narrowing of what I get to enjoy as a human being on Earth because I was born with certain parts. I just wanted to recognize how
Absolutely.
it's rather limiting, and that it's um, like for so many young boys, we're trained, and then girls in another way. We're taught that it's this way and not that way for you. I've seen in my own family where a son and a daughter are treated vastly differently and conditioned differently.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, whether it has to do with like, just simple things of like curfews, or whether it has to do with, you know, even people in the media, that it can't, how media shows up for us, for showing us what a masculine identity is. And Bollywood is a big sort of area where this shows up in so many movies, and, sort of the stereotypical kind of way someone has to be. And I think it's so true it's a pain point for a lot of men that are just like, that's just not what I resonate with anymore. And I think that speaks to, Serbi's son also. Newer generations are like, no. I think I don't even know if that's Gen Alpha, but I don't know what gen that is. She can tell us, but
yeah.
you know, I it's like, no, this is what that changing conversation is. And that was kind of a teaching moment. I don't know if grandfather accepted that answer or not.
Mm.
And but it's an interesting thing that can be happening, right? It's like a child, it's like the truth coming from from babes, right?
Yeah.
They give that truth without filter. It's just like, nope, this is, and I think that's going to be happening more and more. However, we're still kind of dealing with some of these sort of these pressures, these internalized and externalized pressures, as you mentioned. And it can't, you know, there's one, you know, author, an educator, Bell Hooks, you may have heard of her. They describe patriarchy as forcing men into roles of control, strength, and stoicism. You know, this idea of the sacrificial provider, you know, which is sort of an archetype. Men expected to shoulder all these financial, emotional burdens without the complaint. We talked about this, you know, without the fatigue, or the silent warrior. So now it's kind of helpful when you think about the men in your life, like what are some of the roles that they're sort of stepping into. Emotional pain is worn as a badge of honor, maybe. You don't share that with anyone, or you're the good son. Are you the one sort of showing up for the family, you know, taking care of the elder parents, marrying the right person, always supporting everyone else, again, to the neglect of yourself. And I think there's a major fallout from all of that that's happens. Yeah, go ahead.
And another dimension of that, and Annie had mentioned this a few minutes ago too, was this intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
And that in the midst of trying to be, to fit the correct way to be the son, I mean, I still remember hearing like, be a good boy. Either don't cry, be a good boy, or make us proud by such and such action.
Yes.
And so when you have, it's like this, when we perform to satisfy, we can actually cover up pain, even trauma. And when that happens across time, across generations, we can call that intergenerational trauma that's unresolved. And so, I was trying to get to where you were as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a cost. That's a thing that really, I mean, it's not, I think. We know.
We know.
We see it. There is a cost now, you know, just on yourself, and on family members, on, you know, trying to be something that doesn't fit anymore, trying to, you know, like I said, tried to give that framework earlier of the, you know, foundation sort of crumbling or beginning to have cracks, and trying to, you know, sort of support these things, but recognizing, but the thing is, we have to recognize that for ourselves. There's only so much. I know someone you mentioned earlier, I forgot who shared, but it was really vulnerable of her to share about what's going on with her parents. Vulnerability is a really difficult thing for men in general. South Asian men, we just gave you the whole, you know, sort of thesis around why this is so difficult. Vulnerability is not easy, and it's, you know, and that's something we want to make clear to everyone, is it's okay. I think this idea of it's okay to have these shadow parts of yourself that you're not able to verbalize, that you're not able to talk about. And I don't even know if there's words in the different languages, in the mother tongue, right? Language has power. And it's like, how do I express my pain in a language that doesn't hold it for me? So it's like, maybe that's also part of, you know, this idea of, you know, I need to just keep it together because there's nothing that sort of helps me express this properly. Yeah, go ahead.
The challenge here, and in so many South Asians I've worked with, especially people emerging into adulthood, is the space within one's family to recognize an individual experience is not always there.
Yes.
So this idea that, oh, what do I feel? Now I'm in therapy and I get to talk about what do I feel is quite abstract at best. It's foreign, yeah.
Yeah.
And even threatening, because it can be scary to have strong, intense, maybe aversive feelings about one's family or situation. And then still be part of that system.
Absolutely.
And this idea that I'm betraying my family by feeling this way.
Yes, the guilt, the shame, the feeling like I'm just not, you know, I'm doing something wrong here. even when it comes to, and we've got to talk about this, the cost of these silent struggles comes out in different ways. It manifests in different ways, whether it is, anger, right, is kind of the go-to emotion. That's an acceptable emotion, right? For, I think, South Asian men, it's an acceptable emotion, versus tears and versus sort of breaking down or whatever would be most relieving that moment. I think anger just kind of is sort of that primary sort of emotion that comes out pretty easily, and is it because it's most acceptable. And it's the angry male in like the Bollywood movies, shouting at the wife or the children or whatever it is. And that's a cost, right? That trickles down into the nervous systems of children around you, heck, even pets, even, it trickles down through your spouse or through your family members, whoever they are. So that's something that is problematic. Abuse in other ways, right? That's kind of, maybe more like a verbal, emotional, but physical abuse, domestic violence, these things.
Even substance use.
Yes.
To cope.
Yes. And I don't know if it's early in mentioning all this, but I feel like we're right there and it needs to sort of be discussed, right? All of these sort of things are due to this, a lot of times, maybe this feeling of I cannot, express this in any other way. I cannot, I'm unable, or I'm too afraid to bring that vulnerability forward. And I'm not allowed.
With Dr. Bhatt, I'm just doing a little time check. We have just under 25 minutes of talk time, but perhaps we could take maybe the next 10 minutes or so to go into how do we destigmatize? How do we create spaces that are supportive and validating of men's expression of real challenges? How do we make ourselves resources?
Absolutely. I thank you for keeping us honest with the timing.
One of us has to. I would have.
Yeah, no, we could keep.
No, this is great. We could go all
so
afternoon on
much.
this.
I mean, obviously, the whole, well, yes, I'd like to definitely. I think we should move into that. I was just going to add, this idea of the buzzword about toxic masculinity, and I think a lot of it, this is some of the things we shared, right? Like this idea of having to protect ourselves so much so that it sort of internalizes into this space that you're so isolated, and you kind of bleed out in ways that are really for better or worse, this term of toxicity, feeling very negative within yourself. There's a self-loathing that happens. And I just wanted to quickly mention that. I feel like people have scripts inside. We all do, right? Around our own self-talk, how we see ourselves, how we view other people, how we view the world. And I think a lot of times there's a self-loathing that happens because you're not able to, as Dr. Dixit pointed out earlier, it is a grappling between external pressures, internal pressures, the cultural elements. So we feel like we cannot manage all of it. So I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I'm unable to be this powerful person, this assertive, aggressive person, this sort of resilient person, all the things that you all named. I think that's definitely a fallout from this is, bringing in this idea of toxic masculine culture and sort of surrounding yourself sometimes with people that are in that same space. And misery loves company.
I may even go further from that, like as a diving board from what you're saying is that toxic masculinity may be a misguided effort to actually cope with pain, like depression, like anxiety. And it's not, let me be clear, it is not to take responsibility away from negative actors in our society. And I think that when we are able to look at things from a lens of compassion and healing, we might be able to arrive at the heart of the matter in a different way here.
Yes. Yes. And I think somebody mentioned Maxine in the work that she's done with youth. Absolutely. A lot of these challenges lead to suicidality, which is right on. This is like one of the biggest costs, right? We're talking about costs. That's a huge one. The rates are going up for young boys and especially South Asian boys, South Asian males, I think globally. So this is exactly why we need to kind of keep pushing this kind of conversation and talking about healing now. How can we heal together, as a collective, and helping individuals? You guys named a few things about, the phrases about manning up or don't cry or don't be such a wussy or whatever. I think that was an old term.
That's cleaned up. Okay, I remember that word.
It sort of it kind of reinforces that shame about being anything but machismo, right? That whole idea.
It's a steep drop off, and like if you don't match that macho archetype, if you will, then socially there's ramifications.
Exactly. So but how do you help someone challenge that challenge that phrase for themselves?
So one thing that I think about when we're confronted with kind of a sociological level of change we're seeking here is looking at, okay, if I hear something, or if I even think or say something myself, it's where did that come from? How did I arrive at that? Where was my conditioning that led me to believe such and such? When I'm working with someone, clinically, I'll sometimes beckon to that direction of reflecting. Where did this arise? And more often than not, we find that our thoughts are the result of real lived experiences, or things that have been communicated to us implicitly or explicitly.
Yes. Yes. And I think, it's really important for those people in the diaspora, men, elders, parents, uncles, brothers, whoever, partners, to help them recognize, well, a few things. I think definitely that, helping them normalize, right, some of these emotional experiences that they might be feeling, when they want to go to anger, to say it's, this feeling of, it sounds like painful to you. It sounds like hurt. Maybe in your own language, you say that, it sounds like sadness. And, kind of highlighting that, and to say that that's totally understandable given everything that you are going through or what you're struggling with. Highlighting those role models that they may look up to who talk about mental health, or, to help kind of reduce the shame. That does work with especially doctors, medical doctors who are speaking about this, South Asian male medical doctors. That's why I'm glad we have Dr. Dixit today, who's a South Asian doctor, psychologist. But it helps to like use those type of forums to help people sort of and recognize that they're not alone. They're going through this, and that there's people that look like them talking about these things, and that it's, it's okay. It doesn't have to be a journey on oneself. The other thing I feel that's really, really important, that I hope we can, more and more people can, engage in this, is, like you mentioned it very early, Dr. Dixit, about how these things sit in the body, and sort of, we don't have body awareness, and we don't have, in the consciousness around how this impacts physical health, and also breath and our central nervous system. That is a huge sort of area, because where does yoga come from? Where does meditation sort of come from? We have these ancient practices that are at our fingertips. And I feel like if we can, spur on that within families and communities, to say, this is something that I've used, it really helps me settle my breath or settle my, system. I'd love to have my, you and me do this together, whether it's a partner, whether it's, a uncle or a father, or however, the relationship. Can you speak to some of that? You can speak.
Sure.
I'm going to give
I'm
you.
mindful. We were just given the I think we have a 1 minute or so.
Oh, sorry. I mean, you
No,
go.
it's okay. I was just looking at that um, from Suba. Um, I think that there's a whole conversation there about bringing awareness to body and using that to connect to what's happening emotionally. You're totally right on there, Dr. Bhatta, is like this connection, that mind body emotions connection that I think we are systemically conditioned away from in so many ways now more than ever. And then when you throw in judgment, you throw in ideal body type, body image issues, food related issues, the things that were historically or traditionally thought of as women's or girls' problems are well and alive with young men and boys too, for that matter. What I want to say is, if you're trying to support someone, and as clinicians, I think we live in a space grounded in validation. But if you're not a clinician, you don't have to be a therapist to help someone, of course. Is when in doubt, validate. Validate what's going on. People are not always ready for a solution. Maybe they don't even want the solution right away. But don't be afraid to recognize and meet someone where they are, that this is a hard thing right now and that they're not alone. And that is the truth. They're not alone. And I think there's a whole lot more we can talk about. I'm curious to see what questions people have. Maybe we can meet people there. What do you think, Dr. Botts?
So, I mean, I feel like there's, I think small steps, right? I mean, it's conversations like these, finding those healing spaces. If you know of groups that you know someone that's struggling, helping them find that community group. I recently trying to direct some folks to South Asian substance abuse groups. I think there's substance use disorder groups, sorry. I think there's I know SAMHAJ does that, and I'm sure NAMI has so many. So that's really, really nice just to think about resources, thinking about, any kind of podcasts that are really good. Nowadays, people are listening on the go that are tailored to more of men's mental health, and then finding those that might resonate with South Asian folks. There are quite a few more now. I know the Happy and Human podcast, which I'm going to put a plug in there. They're really great. They tackle a lot of these issues. And I think the one thing that I mentioned in the very beginning that I want to get back to quickly before we get these questions is understanding, the cultural competency of therapists and all of us to, sort of shore up our own education around this and bringing, sort of a more culturally sensitive mental health, service to clients.
We appreciate everyone who's shown here and for just engaging with us. Looking forward to questions, comments. I want to say this, and this is even for someone who wants to help another person, is that even being a helper can be scary. I want to validate that. I think we're even physiologically wired to run from something we're afraid of. And I think that works when it's, a snake or a tiger. But when we're running away from our emotions and our very personal internal truths, I think that's where it comes at our own detriment running. Whether that's within ourselves or, our family member, a friend, a peer, a colleague. And I think if there's one thing that hurts on top of the hurt is the isolation. So if you or someone is struggling, I think the first thing is to recognize that and help them connect with someone who can support them in the right way. And I know that I came into this field to be a helper, to find answers to things that weren't given to me. And I know everyone here is for a reason right now. Everyone here showed up for a reason, to heal or to be a helper, maybe both.
And there's no bad questions.
Yeah.
There's, we're all sort of stumbling along to figure this out, right? Together. So I want to really make sure that you all feel, comfortable to share any question. I know some of the questions earlier were about sharing feelings and those kind of things. I hope that we were able to sort of give you a little backdrop around what's going on. I think one of the biggest things that Dr. Dixon and I also, I think just invariably we do, or we like to bring out, is the empathic views of a situation. Feel like that is lacking these days, in the world. And we want to really, not that it's lacking so much, but in the sense of maybe in our own echo chambers, it's not, but generally out there, we want to bring, I think that's why we do these kind of talks, right? Is to raise the empathic awareness, and to help people feel seen, feel heard, and realize that this is an ongoing journey that's going to keep unfolding. And it's really never too late for any support and to talk to someone, to, share. It's just never too late for any of that. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
That's great, Dr. Batts.
There is one question in the chat. Do you guys have any advice to how to open up the conversation if you notice someone struggling who may not be willing to admit they need help or that mental health even exists?
Go for it.
I'll jump in.
I'll jump in after.
First of all, thank you just for even trying to be there for someone. I think it's not an easy place to be, to witness someone who's in the water flailing around, and you want to throw them a raft or a float, and they don't see the float or they don't want it. And that's a hard place to be. Just know this much, that wherever that person is, it didn't start yesterday. And their ideas about even seeking help or accepting help or even recognizing difficulty or pain or suffering in themselves might be in a different place than what you can see and recognize. And that this conversation might be happening in multiple parts. It may not happen all at once. And as much as you want them to change or find help, it might not happen in one shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And also I would just add, like, I know this happens a lot with clients who want to bring a family member in who refuse, if it's something like where you are already seeing a therapist and you would like them to join your therapy, and that can also be done sometimes. Or if it's, they're just refusing altogether, like Dr. Dixit said, it's a multiple part conversation, but I think it's nice and helpful sometimes to lean on a collective. So if there is an objective, elder or a friend or someone that's a little bit removed from the situation, but is also very, open-minded, about mental health issues, but they respect them, that could be someone, if you feel comfortable to connect together on about these conversations, if they are open to it. Obviously, it's not, it would have to, that's what I mean by several approaches and several sort of ways of going about it. But sometimes I want to sort of hearken to that idea of, that's a collectivist sort of approach sometimes, which is like, who are those people in our corner that we really love and respect, and who can see us and value us in a way that uplifts us. It's not that auntie that may be talking, challenging you on what your skin color or like what's happening with your relationship, or that uncle, but it's someone who maybe you feel sort of connected to in some way. Maybe it's your friend's family member or whoever, but it would have to be someone obviously that person feels very comfortable with. So I just wanted to bring that up, as I know that happens in our culture. I've seen it in communities, and I just want to make sure. The only thing I would add is be very discerning on who that person is, and hopefully they can help point them towards a direction of some resources. Even a support group would be nice, if you want to join them, right?
I love that community approach. If it turns out that you are one of those people that the person trusts, I might offer most tangibly here is to kind of start the conversation, kind of to open figuratively the door, And so you might start off with a very simple observation. Hey, I noticed you're looking kind of down, or I noticed you've just been canceling our hangouts. Whatever you're noticing most tangibly, I'm talking about low-hanging fruit here, things that you can very clearly see, without having to jump to assigning a value or blame or anything like that. And maybe a comment like, if there's anything you'd want to talk about, anything going on, I'm here. And sometimes just saying that might give them just enough of a door opening for them to come back to you. And kind of part and parcel of what you're saying, Dr. Bhatt, is try not to put too much pressure on yourself because you have a community around you.
Yes. And yeah, absolutely. I just want to add also that in some workplaces, they actually offer such assistance.
EAP.
There's programs, there's some companies that are really trying to up their game with this. So if someone is struggling at work, helping them recognize that this is a private space, it's confidential. I think that's a big thing that people struggle with is confidentiality. I will always get that question from South Asian folks. Is this going to come up later in my life? Is it going to come up on some kind of report card, or is this going to come up on some kind of like online, place? And the answer is absolutely not. We are held to a very high ethical standards around confidentiality, unless obviously you're going to share that you're going to hurt someone, hurt somebody else, hurt yourself, those kind of things. But other than that, it's very confidential with whomsoever you're talking to.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatt and Dr. Dixit, for a wonderful, wonderful conversation and a thought-provoking conversation. I appreciate very much for both of you for giving your time on a Wednesday afternoon. So thank you so much. And I thank all the participants for their participation. Caitlin, thank you so much for jumping in and putting the polls and all that. And this actually demonstrates that we all have a shared interest, a passion for mental health, and breaking the stigma within our communities. And also, I would like to give an extra special thanks to NAMI New Jersey and their 4 multicultural programs for bringing these multicultural conversations. And we all know this, but I just want to mention one more time, we are one of the most diverse states in the country. And in order to meet the needs of our residents, the mental health services and resources we provide must also be diverse. So that's the reason we have these multicultural programs. Before we close the webinar, the views and opinions expressed in this conversation are those of the speakers. And I would like to share with our participants that there are many resources available on our NAMI New Jersey website and our multicultural programs, NAMI New Jersey and advocacy and affiliate newsletters has tons of resources. So please check them out and subscribe if you get a chance. You can also become a member if you are not already. With that being said, all our programs are free. You'll be able to find where our statewide online support groups are, affiliate support groups are, multicultural program groups, signature programs, as well as webinars and presentations like this one. Feel free to reach out to NAMI New Jersey for any support you might need. And once again, thank you, Dr. Bhatt and Dr. Dixit, for sharing this 1.5 hours with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. This concludes our webinar, and gentle reminder that you are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well, everybody.
Be well. Yes.
Thank you so much.